Okay, so this is the speaking version of a series of videos that I'm going to make about how to cope with the test on test day. So the most important thing that you need to do is prepare before the test, but there's a number of things that you need to keep in mind on test day. So what I decided to do was make a video about speaking, one about writing, one about listening, and one about reading. So this one is all about speaking and the things that you should be doing and some of the things that you shouldn't be doing on test day, and some very practical things and that you need to do in order to help improve your score, and then some other things that are a little bit more theory based but will also help you improve your score. So what is this video about? So it's really just 7 things. So I've distilled it down to 7 things that I think that you should be doing, or some things you shouldn't be doing on test day. As we often get questions like, my test is tomorrow, what should I do? So this is kind of a selfish video in a way, so that I can just send people this video because we get asked that question a lot, but it definitely will help you if you have that question or your test is coming up soon. And your IELTS preparation should start months before your test. But if you're already prepared, here are some things that you should do. So please do not think that all you need to do is just follow these 7 things and you'll get a band 9 in your speaking test. The work starts weeks, months, even years before your test begins. But this video is just about what to think about on test day. So number 1. Really obvious, but something that very few people do: get there on time. A huge number of students get there late. You're sitting waiting for the student to come in, and they come in all sweaty and stressed out because they've been running up the stairs and running from public transport, or just jumped out of a car, and it's not the best way to prepare, guys, for your speaking test. And even more, have no idea where the test is being held in the building. You are going probably to a very strange place in a strange building, and again, a number of people come running into the test and because they just don't know where the room is and everything, and that's your responsibility to get there early and to find out exactly what has happened. Compare a student who gets there early and finds out exactly what is going on and is sitting patiently waiting for the test to begin, with someone who is, running in 2 minutes late, 3 minutes late, and they're very confused and stressed out. You want to minimize stress and anxiety as much as possible. This might sound like an extreme scenario, but I have had students who you could tell that their English is pretty good, and they were going to do very well, but because they have just sprinted in from the street and they don't know really where the room is and they're very late, their whole test just falls apart. Their fluency suffers. They make lots of grammar mistakes. They make lots of vocabulary mistakes because they're so stressed out and anxious. And the main reason was that because they were so late. So find out exactly where you're going, get there early, find out exactly where the room is, where you can get water, where the toilets are, all of that stuff, and that will just make you far more relaxed. That might sound like a silly thing to say, but you would not believe the number of students who arrive late and are very stressed out and get lower scores because of this. Other thing related to stress and anxiety: don't worry about the examiner. A huge number of students that I speak to say, my examiner was not nice, or my examiner did not smile to me, or smile at me, or my examiner just wasn't a nice person. The examiner does not care about you as much as you think. So when you say things like, my examiner wasn't nice, or my examiner, didn't treat me properly, you're really assuming that the examiner has an opinion about you or really cares about you in any way. They don't. Do you get nervous when ordering from McDonald's? So worrying about the examiner is the same as worrying about someone serving you at McDonald's or KFC, what they think about you. You are just another candidate, just like you are just another customer in McDonald's. You think that this is a massive deal, and it is a massive deal for you. It is a big day for you. It's a very important thing. For an IELTS examiner, it's just another day at the office, and they don't think about you either way. They are completely indifferent to you. They don't dislike you and they don't like you. They're just indifferent to you. and they're doing their job. Their job description does not include being nice to you. I know that in a lot of cultures, you're used to these nice teachers. I call them Disney teachers. Like basically, you know, everything is happy and everything is nice, and you judge a teacher based on whether they are nice or not. Most IELTS examiners are not going to be like a Disney character, or staff at Disney World who are going to, you know, be very, very smiley and very nice to you. If you find that off-putting, you just have to get over that. You could be the best candidate ever or the worst candidate ever. It does not matter to them. So you could completely mess up your IELTS test, or you could get a band 9. The examiner does not care. They're just there to doing their job. Often I've been sitting with other IELTS examiners after a test day, and you know, we're sitting talking about football or what happened last weekend. We are not talking about candidates because we simply do not care about them personally. They care about your getting your score accurate. They very much care about that, but they don't really care whether you do well or don't do well, or you know, what your appearance is or what you're like at all. So this will really help people if they think about it in this way, and help people with their stress and anxiety. Number 3, speak to the examiner like a human being, like you are a human being and like they are a human being. Record yourself doing a speaking test and listen back to it. How do you sound? And compare that with how you normally speak. So in my courses, I speak to students all the time. And one of the things that I notice is before the test begins, and where you normally do mock tests with them, and before the test begins, we're normally, you know, having a chat about just, you know, small talk or about their lives and just things in general. And they're speaking to me normally. Their fluency is good, their grammar is good, their vocabulary is good, they're communicating with me effectively. And then I say, okay, let's start the exam, and they turn into a robot. Like, my name is such and such, I am from, it sounds like a robot or a computer talking rather than a human being talking. And I know this is a stressful test, but try not to sound like a robot. It's not a nice way to speak to anyone anyway. So if you speak to the examiner like they're a human being, and you speak like a human being, your fluency is going to be better, your grammar is going to be better, your vocabulary is going to be better. So speak to the examiner like you would speak to a colleague in work or a classmate. Everything will improve if you do this. If you speak like a robot, your fluency is not going to be so good. Also, I just tend to notice that people make far more grammar mistakes and far more vocabulary mistakes, and sometimes pronunciation issues when they are speaking in this overly academic, overly formal, robotic style. That's not how people speak to each other. Normalize the situation, and you would not believe how much of a relief it is as an examiner to speak to someone who speaks to us like we are a normal human being rather than an IELTS recording device. You will be so refreshing, and you will stand out because most students talk like robots and speak to us like we're robots. So focus on clear communication is number 4. So your main focus should be on clearly communicating with the examiner. It is not a show how many big words I memorized test. Alright? It is not a show how many high level, impressive, academic, or whatever you want to call them, word test. It's not an idioms test either. It's not a show how my accent makes me sound like a Disney character test. It's weird that you speak to someone who has a very clear accent, and then they go into the test and they sound like they're a character from Frozen or something, like, hey, how are you? And it just sounds ridiculous. It is not a show how many grammar structures and tenses I know test. So again, if you're going into the test thinking, okay, I've got a list of big words and I know lots of different structures and tenses, and that's my main focus, you're going to mess everything up. That is not how people speak to each other. How people speak to each other is they just clearly communicate by speaking naturally to each other. It is a speaking test. IELTS want to know if you can clearly communicate in English. That's it. All right. So vocabulary is important, grammar is important, but you should be using those things as tools to help you communicate rather than focusing on them and using them as a crutch. So if in doubt, just relax and clearly answer the question. Communicate with the examiner. Students who do that tend to do much, much better than these students who, all they do is think about, okay, how many big words and idioms and structures and tenses can I use? Try doing that in your native language. Try having a conversation with someone and focusing on that. It's really difficult and you'll sound silly. But if you just focus on clear communication, everything will be much, much better. Number 5, your ideas are not as important as you think. Fluency is 25% of your total mark, and one thing I notice is people's fluency, there's 2 types of fluency problem really on the IELTS speaking test. Language related fluency problems and ideas related fluency problems. When you don't have enough grammar and enough vocabulary, you tend to be you're trying to think of the grammar and the vocabulary. In my experience, that is not as big a problem as what I would call ideas-related vocabulary issues. When students are they're pausing and hesitating because they're trying to think of impressive ideas. And they can't think of these ideas, and it lowers their fluency. And then when you start having fluency problems, you get nervous, you get stressed out, and it snowballs into you making lots of grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation mistakes. Relax about your ideas. Many students spend too much time or mental processing time thinking about ideas. You do not get extra marks for good ideas. There is not a list of ideas that will get you a high mark. Again, your main focus should be on clearly communicating with the examiner. As long as you're answering the question, you'll be fine. And it's not as, so what a lot of students say then is, well, what is the answer to the question? So there is no one answer to the question. If the examiner says to you something like, what's your favorite season of the year? Spring is a correct idea. Summer is a correct idea. Autumn is a correct idea. Winter is a correct idea. None of them is a correct idea. All of them is a correct idea. The examiner is not testing your knowledge or your IQ. The examiner is just testing whether you can clearly communicate in English. And really the topics and the ideas are just context that allow you to do that. So relax about the ideas, guys. It's not like the writing test where the ideas are quite important and help you get higher marks. In the speaking test, grammar, vocabulary, fluency and coherence and pronunciation are the only 4 things you need to worry about. As long as you're answering the question, that's included under the fluency and coherence bit, you'll be fine. There are 100 different, in quotation marks, correct answers or correct ideas. Number 6, keep it simple. The worst thing you can do is try to use words, phrases, structures you're not 100% sure about. So, for example, there's a huge difference between learning a list of words, which is what a lot of students do, and actually using those words in a sentence. So I could give you 100, so-called band 9 or so-called high-level words. There aren't any, but I could give you a list of words that look really good on paper. And you could memorize them, and you could memorize the meaning of them even. You could memorize the pronunciation of them even. But unless you know how to use them correctly in a sentence, you're going to mess everything up. This is especially true with things like idioms. So if you insert lots of idioms that you do not fully understand, you will get a lower score than someone that uses simple language that is correct. If you have a choice between using so-called complex or high-level language that you're not 100% sure about, or just keeping it simple and actually getting it correct and actually communicating clearly with the examiner, keep it simple and use that. The level of vocabulary and grammar that you need to get, let's say, a band 7 is actually much lower than you think. It is a paradox that a lot of you think that in order to get a high mark, what you should do is you should learn more complicated language and use more complicated language. But when you do that, you're going to make a lot more, a lot more mistakes. It's going to lower your grammar score, lower your vocabulary score, and you're going to get a lower score overall. Have faith in the level of grammar and vocabulary that you have. Use the grammar and vocabulary that you have to clearly communicate, and you'll do much better. That is one of the hardest things for a student to accept, because they have been told numerous times by numerous people that you need to use this complicated, complex language. A lot of you watching this video will totally disagree with that, and that's fine. If you want to continue to do it the way you've been doing it and keep failing, that's okay with me. But if you want to stop failing and get the score that you need, maybe consider using language that is actually correct. So number 7, the last one, focus on what matters. So what matters? Fluency and coherence, pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. These are the only things that matter. This might sound like a joke, but before I saw a whole article, like a 1,000-word article on what clothes to wear to impress the examiner, like that. And that isn't even the worst thing that I've read in the IELTS world. Like, the clothes you wear do not matter. The hand gestures you have do not matter. Whether you smile or whether you don't smile does not matter. Eye contact doesn't matter. And ideas, really, as long as you're answering the question, doesn't really matter which ideas you pick, as long as you are, giving coherent ideas that answer the question. The 4 things that you need to worry about is vocabulary. Do you have enough vocabulary to talk about the things that they are asking you about? Can you use vocabulary accurately? Grammar. Do you have enough grammar structure, tenses, things like that to talk about the things that they're asking you to talk about? Pronunciation. Can you speak clearly? Can the examiner understand what you're saying? Fluency. Can you talk at a normal rate without pauses and hesitations? And coherence. Is what you're saying actually making sense, and are you answering the question? If you focus on the things that matter rather than the hundreds of other things that you'll find on the internet that don't really matter, you'll do much, much better. So those are 7 things that you need to think about. And let's just finish with a quote. I found this today. The will to succeed is important, but what's more important is the will to prepare. So it doesn't matter how much you want to get the score, to get a band 7 or get a band 8 or whatever, if you haven't prepared. If your test is tomorrow or in the next few days, do the best that you can following what I said in this video. And let's hope that you pass. If you don't pass, don't freak out, don't start crying, or maybe cry for the first hour or whatever you want to do, but realize that your preparation starts weeks and months before your test, not the day before your test. And anybody can get the score that they want with the proper preparation. So hopefully you found that useful, and good luck on test day, and I'll be making more videos about test day for listening, reading and writing. If you need anything, any free resources, go to IELTSadvantage.com and you'll get all the stuff there. Thanks very much, guys. See you soon. Good luck. Bye bye.